G'day, thanks for watching. My name's Pastor Mike and this is my 2020 Anzac Dawn Service message. I've been actually blessed to be involved with the Dawn Service at Nairne and in sharing the message for about the last 6 years now, I think, and I count it a tremendous privilege and I've been humbled to be involved with that. As a Christian, the sacrifice of Jesus and his service to the world, to all the world, is the key truth of my life. And I see in the Anzacs, in their service and their sacrifice, a real reflection of that. Obviously, there's some pretty big differences, but there's a lot of similarities as well. And so that makes this involvement in the Anzac Day service all the more special for me. And it's very different this year, obviously, from what we've normally done as a Dawn Service Remembrance. But I really want to thank Paul Wilton, our president from the Nairne RSL sub-branch, for his support of me posting my message this year online. So when I think about what to share each year, I don't just want to do the same thing over and over. I actually like to find something that's relevant for us at this moment. And that's the real key for me. I look for something that's relevant in the story, to take something relevant from what happened for the Anzacs and is still true and powerful for us today. And so an example of this is the mateship that we hear about, almost the legendary mateship of the diggers in the trenches there, especially in Gallipoli, I guess, but even all through armed conflicts that Australian soldiers have been involved with. And I think, well, I still see that mateship in our society today. And I think a great example of that is the way that we rallied as a community to support those who were so badly affected by the bushfire crisis in our region earlier this year. That says to me that what we saw back then, we still see today. It's still alive. We're still connected with this story. It was Australians then, and we are Australians now. The other thing I love to do is, after finding relevance, is to reflect and remember. What was happening, especially a century ago, as we see the end of World War I? What was happening then? How do we dive into this story and see some really powerful truths that speak to us still today and make this dawn service so much more alive? And we know that for us, even though the World War I ended on the 11th of November 1918, that it was up to a year before those soldiers still saw home. And some of them actually went on and fought in other minor conflicts after World War I ended, such as in Russia and Egypt. So this thing didn't just end nice and neatly, it dragged on. And even more powerful for us this year is to understand that in mid-1918, our soldiers, or our servicemen and women, started to fight a different enemy in the Spanish flu pandemic, which started there in 1918 and spread throughout the world up until 1920 and was carried across the world partly by returning soldiers. And a historical fact that I never thought we would be able to relate to is what happened in terms of the quarantining of Australian soldiers before they got home. I just want to read this bit to you. After waiting months to depart Europe, upon arriving home, many of the Australian transport ships were held in quarantine. Alexander Burns of the 7th Battalion, who arrived in February 1919, after 2.5 years of service, was forced to wait another 2 frustrating months before being allowed to leave his ship. Others, like Private Harry Hansell, who enlisted in July 1918, never saw any active action, but watched many people die from an outbreak of flu on his transport ship. Would you have ever believed that Australia 2020, we would be able to relate to the stories that we're hearing of what happened at the end of World War I? We are more connected to these servicemen and women than we realise. They were Australians, we're Australians, and there is a theme connecting us this year as much as ever. What I really want to focus on today in my message is the hidden effects of war. That physical scars were obvious, but there were other scars that were left on the soldiers when they came back. I'm talking about emotional scars that were just as painful and just as long lasting. We know that many soldiers struggled to fit back into Australian life when they returned home. They weren't able to settle down and they had to go at everything as they tried to find, where do I belong? Because something's changed. This is still Australia, but I'm fundamentally changed. Some of the hardest adjustments for the men was in their mind. And we know that after the soldiers got home in 1919, there was an upsurge of violence and drunkenness, especially in Australian cities. And these men tried to process and even tried to forget what was so foremost in their mind. And I want to recite a poem by a returned soldier named Vance Palmer that speaks of these invisible wounds, and it's called The Farmer Remembers the Somme, and the words are going to come up just here. Will they never fade or pass, the mud and the misty figures endlessly coming in file through the foul morass, and the grey floodwater lipping the reeds and grass, and the steel wings drumming? The hills are bright in the sun. There's nothing's changed or marred in the world-known places. When work for the day is done, there's talk and quiet laughter and gleams of fun in the old folks' home. I've returned to these, the farm and the kindly bush and the young calves lowing. But all that my mind sees is a quaking bog in a mist stark snap trees and the dark Somme flowing. And the interesting thing about the author Vance Palmer is that he was actually a pacifist and an active anti-conscriptionist who wrestled for a long time before he actually joined the AIF. He joined early in 1918 when the Great German Offensive threatened for them to have victory to the war, to overcome the Allies. And that was enough to make him decide, yeah, I am going to actually join this war effort. But ironically, the battalion he was a part of, the 14th Battalion, the reinforcements, actually got to Europe after the war had ended, after the armistice had been declared. And so he never actually saw any active fighting, but he still saw the battlefields, he still saw the Somme, he still saw the effect of the Australia that it had had on the Australian soldiers. And he chose to, as a poet and a writer, as a poet, to start focusing on the Great War, but particularly the psychological malaise induced by participation in the war as a recurrent theme in his writing. And his collection of poetry called The Camp includes what the literary critic H.M. Green regarded as one of Australia's finest war poems, and just got some information about it. As Palmer writes, he is a farmer who has returned to the farm and the kindly bush and the young calves lowing. But where the war still haunts his mind, he contrasts home with the Somme, where there was mud and the misty figures endlessly coming. The battlefield was soul-destroying, filled with death and danger. But the problem for him now is he sees it everywhere he goes. He recalls it in vivid detail, showing this in the line, but all that my mind sees is a quaking bog in a mist stark snap trees. He likens this quaking bog to a living thing, as if the very setting he is in is dangerous. The haunting memory in itself is a danger to him. Although the Australia he left hasn't changed, he's well aware that he is forever scarred by the war and its memories will never pass. This was a really challenging topic for Palmer to write about, for himself and for Australia. In post-war Australia, it was taboo to talk about the mental health of soldiers. But that is the thing I'm focusing on today. I do believe we're more than physical beings. I believe we're more than just intellectual beings. I believe we're soul, spirit, and body. I believe emotional wounds have physical impacts or outworkings in our lives, such as someone with a broken heart emotionally experiences depression and sadness and loss of appetite. The things are linked. You can't just pretend they're not connected. And the same is true that someone who has a faith, is aware or awake to eternity, can work their way through the darkest days physically, such as battles with cancer, with amazing courage and peace. It's because we're more than just physical beings. And I think the Anzacs worked this out. They realized this. It was why the first dawn service happened in 1916 on the 1-year anniversary of the landings at Gallipoli. The soldiers were aware of the weight of what they'd been involved in was having on their souls. This physical thing was having an emotional and a spiritual outworking. And that's why the first dawn services were exclusively and intentionally church services. These men were coming to God and were looking for comfort and for healing and even for forgiveness for the things that they had done for their country in the name of war. We know that really we've come a long way in terms of mental health as a nation. I personally feel we're more aware than ever of the importance of helping people deal with their mental health. This hasn't always been the case, but it is now. And this year, we've had some really big battles as a community, as a region. We've gone through some big things that have left physical scars, but they've also left emotional scars. And my challenge or my encouragement, my urging to you today is let's honour the Anzacs by dealing with these scars. Let's tell our stories. Let's let this, our soul wants to process it. This is what this man was doing as he wrote this poem. He was processing what was inside of him. And as he listened to the stories of the other soldiers who were there and had fought at the Somme, this is his way of processing it and getting this out. This is stuff that needs to come out of our souls, because if it stays there, it damages us, it wounds us. And a way that we can honour our Anzacs is to actually say this year, hey, let's support each other. If every person showed uncommon mateship to one other person, then we would all be supported. We would all be supported. And we've never had greater access to mental health resources this year. We don't have to fight this stuff alone. We don't have to stay silent. Have we ever been more all in this together than we are right now as we work through this COVID-19 pandemic? I say one of the ways we can honour our Anzacs this year above all other years is telling our stories and is looking after each other. I just want to finish by reading Psalm 23 and then leading us in the Lord's Prayer, which I want to invite you to pray along with me. You know, God didn't cause the bushfires, He didn't cause COVID-19, He didn't cause World War I, but He was there being with us, comforting us and keeping us safe as much as He could that whole way through. He was with us. He was with the soldiers and He's with us now. And He wants to comfort us. He wants to give us healing and He wants to give us peace, even in the midst of these battles. So right now I want to read Psalm 23 to you. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely Your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And now I invite you to say the Lord's Prayer with me. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be Your name. Your kingdom come, Your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Hey, thanks for watching and for standing together apart this year to honour those who served for us. God bless.